The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a signal so old that most human technology could not even recognize it. The frequency had not been used in thousands of years. It took the archivists at the Seoul Communication Center 3 full days to find a machine ancient enough to decode it. When they finally played the message, the entire room fell silent. Attention, primitive species of the third planet. The recording began. A reptilian face filled the screen. Green scales covered its head, and yellow eyes stared forward with absolute confidence. I am High Commander Thax Vor of the Vorth Dominion. 6,000 of your years ago, our scouts visited your world. They found you living in mud huts, fighting with sticks and stones. They marked your planet for future conquest. The alien paused and showed its teeth in what might have been a smile. That future has arrived. You have 1 solar cycle to surrender. You will give us all your territory. You will submit to genetic cataloging. You will provide 1 billion of your kind as servants. Refuse, and we will burn your world to ash. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. The message ended. The archivists looked at each other. Then one of them started laughing. Within seconds, the entire room was laughing so hard that tears ran down their faces. The year was 8,147 by the old Earth calendar. Humanity had changed quite a bit since the Bronze Age. Ambassador Yara Chen received the news while having breakfast on Mars. She was 412 years old, though she looked no older than 40. Medical technology had long ago solved the problem of aging. She had served as a diplomat for 3 centuries, handling everything from trade disputes to first contact situations. But this was something new. Let me understand this correctly, she said to her assistant. A friendly artificial intelligence named Helen. These aliens visited Earth 6,000 years ago, decided we would make good slaves, and then just forgot about us? Not forgot, Helen replied. Her voice was warm and pleasant. Their bureaucratic systems simply moved very slowly. According to the data we have recovered, the Vorth Dominion operates on conquest schedules that span millennia. Earth was added to a queue. It took 6,000 years for our turn to come up. Yara set down her coffee cup. And they have no idea what happened since then? It appears not. Their last scan of Earth was during what humans called the Bronze Age. They seemed to expect to find the same level of technology. Yara started to smile. Then she started to laugh. She laughed until her sides hurt. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Human Council was held that afternoon. Representatives from 3 galaxies attended through holographic projection. Trillions of humans existed now, spread across countless worlds, moons, and space stations. Some lived in biological bodies. Some had uploaded their minds into digital form. Some existed as both at the same time. Humanity had become something wonderful and strange. Yara stood before the council and read the Vorth Declaration aloud. She kept her voice serious and professional, but it was hard. By the time she finished, the entire council chamber was filled with laughter. 1 billion slaves, an elderly representative from the Andromeda colony said, wiping his eyes. They want 1 billion slaves from a civilization of 30 trillion. They think we still use spears. A digital consciousness named Aurora added. Her avatar flickered with amusement. This is adorable. Yara raised her hand for silence. The question before us is simple. How do we respond? The debate that followed was short. Nobody wanted to destroy the Vorth. That was not who humanity had become. The species that had once waged world wars and built nuclear weapons had grown past such things. They had nearly destroyed themselves many times before learning better ways. Now, violence was seen as a failure of imagination, but they could not simply ignore the declaration either. The Vorth might hurt themselves trying to attack, or they might move on to threaten other, less advanced species. We should invite them for tea, one representative suggested. Show them around. Let them see what we have become. They might not believe it, another replied. Their pride could make them do something foolish. Yara nodded slowly. Then we need to be careful. We need to show them the truth without humiliating them too badly. They are not evil. They are simply behind. Very, very behind. The council agreed. Yara was given full authority to handle the situation as she saw fit. That evening, Yara sat in her apartment and looked out at the Martian landscape. The red planet had been transformed over centuries. Green forests covered the hills. Blue lakes sparkled under the domed sky. Cities of crystal and light dotted the horizon. This was just one world among thousands that humanity called home. She thought about her ancestors, the ones who had lived in mud huts 6,000 years ago. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had built pyramids and sailed across oceans. They had split atoms and walked on the moon. They had nearly ended themselves in nuclear fire, then pulled back from the edge. They had created artificial intelligence, merged with it, argued with it, and eventually made peace with it. They had spread to the stars, and through it all, they had kept their strange mix of humor and hope. The universe was vast and often cruel, but humans had learned to laugh at it. Laughter was their shield against despair. Her communicator chimed. Helen's voice spoke softly. "Ambassador, our long-range sensors have detected the Vorth fleet. 10,000 warships. They are 3 days away from the Sol system." 10,000. Yara repeated. She remembered the Hive War. Centuries ago, when humanity had faced billions of enemy vessels. 10,000 was nothing. Less than nothing. Their weapons technology appears to be approximately 6,000 years behind current human standards, Helen continued. Their most powerful weapons could not scratch the paint on a civilian transport. Yara sighed. That's what I was afraid of. They're going to get hurt if they try anything. What would you like to do? Yara thought for a long moment. She thought about all the wars humanity had fought, all the lessons they had learned. She thought about mercy and pride and the strange path that led from mud huts to starships. "Prepare a welcome committee," she finally said, "and make sure everyone knows the rules. No matter what they do, we don't hurt them. Not one scratch. Not one bruise. We're going to show them something they've never seen before." "And what is that?" Yara smiled. "Kindness. Overwhelming, unstoppable kindness. They won't know what hit them." She turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, 10,000 alien warships were racing toward Earth, ready for conquest. Their commanders dreamed of glory and victory. They had no idea that they were about to become the most famous joke in 3 galaxies. But Yara did not want them to be a joke. She wanted them to become friends. That was the human way now. Not conquest, but connection. Not destruction, but transformation. The Vorth had come looking for slaves. They would find something far more dangerous instead. They would find teachers. Supreme Commander Thax Vor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, and watched the stars blur as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 10,000 warships followed behind him. The pride of the Vorth Dominion, the greatest military force his species had ever assembled. Today would be a day of glory. "Report," he commanded. His voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together. The sensor officer, a young Vorth named Krell, studied his screens. Then he studied them again. Then he rubbed his eyes and looked a third time. "Commander," Krell said slowly, "there appears to be a problem with our sensors." "What kind of problem?" "They are showing impossible things." Thax Vor strode across the bridge and looked at the screens himself. What he saw made no sense. The Sol system, home of the primitive humans, should have been nearly empty. Perhaps a few metal satellites. Maybe some basic spacecraft. The reports from 6,000 years ago had been very clear. Instead, the screens showed millions of structures. Giant stations orbited every planet. Rings of metal surrounded the gas giants. Ships moved everywhere. More ships than Thax Vor had ever seen in his life. And Earth itself. Earth glowed like a jewel. The entire planet was covered in light. Cities stretched from pole to pole. Enormous rings circled the planet, carrying traffic in endless streams. The moon had been transformed into what looked like a massive port facility. "There must be an error," Thax Vor said. "Run the scans again." They ran the scans again, and again. The results did not change. Sub-Commander Riss approached carefully. She was Thax Vor's second in command, chosen for her intelligence and caution. "Commander, if I may speak freely." "Speak. This is not what we expected. Perhaps we should pause and gather more information before..." "Before what?" Thax Vor turned on her, his yellow eyes blazing. "Before we run away like frightened hatchlings? The Vorth do not run. These primitives may have built some impressive structures, but structures are not warriors. We will crush them as planned." Riss lowered her head. "Yes, Commander." Before Thax Vor could give another order, something appeared on the view screen. A small vessel was approaching the fleet. It was tiny, no bigger than a personal transport. It had no visible weapons. It moved with a strange, casual grace, as if it were taking a pleasant afternoon flight. One ship? Thaxvor was confused. They send one ship against 10,000? It appears to be a civilian vessel, Krell reported. No military markings, no shields detected, no weapons detected. What game is this? A communication request came through. Thaxvor nodded, and the screen flickered to life. A young human face appeared. Male, perhaps 20 years old by their species standards. He had messy brown hair and was wearing what appeared to be casual clothing. He held up a small device and pointed it at the screen. "Hey, everyone," the human said cheerfully. "Marcus here, coming to you live from the edge of the Sol system. You are not going to believe this, but I found them, the lizard guys from the memes. They actually showed up." Thaxvor stared. "What is this creature doing?" "I believe he is broadcasting," Riss said slowly. To an audience. The human continued talking rapidly. "Okay, so for those who don't know, like 6,000 years ago these aliens visited Earth and decided they wanted to conquer us. But they forgot about us until last week. Now they're here with their whole fleet. And honestly, this is the funniest thing that's happened all year." Thaxvor's scales flushed dark with anger. "This insect mocks us. Fire a warning shot. Destroy his vessel." The weapons officer obeyed. Energy beams lanced out from the Eternal Victory, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. They struck the tiny human vessel directly. Nothing happened. The human did not even flinch. He continued talking to his device. "Oh nice, free light show. Thanks guys. Very pretty." Thaxvor's jaw dropped. "What? How? Commander?" Krell said in a shaking voice. "Our weapons had no effect. The human vessel appears to have some form of shielding. Our scans cannot even measure its power output. It is beyond our understanding." The human on the screen was now laughing. Okay, I should probably let the grown-ups handle this. Hang on, let me patch you through to someone official." He tapped his device a few times. "Hey Helen, I've got the Vorth commander on the line. Can you transfer them?" A new voice answered. Female, calm, and impossibly pleasant. "Of course, Marcus. Thank you for making first contact. Have a pleasant day." "Thanks, Helen. Good luck with the invasion stuff." The screen flickered again. The young human disappeared, replaced by a simple graphic interface and the voice of the AI named Helen. "Greetings, Supreme Commander Thaxvor of the Vorth Dominion. I am Helen, a General Assistance Artificial Intelligence. How may I help you today?" Thaxvor took a moment to find his voice. "I demand to speak with your leaders. Immediately. I would be happy to connect you. However, I should mention that humanity does not currently operate under a single leadership structure. We have various councils, committees, and democratic assemblies that handle different matters. For your specific situation, I would recommend speaking with Ambassador Yara Chen, who has been assigned to handle your visit. Shall I connect you?" "Visit?" Thaxvor roared. "This is not a visit. This is a conquest." "I understand," Helen replied, her voice still perfectly pleasant. "Ambassador Chen will be happy to discuss your conquest with you. Please hold." Music began to play. Gentle, peaceful music. Thaxvor stood on his bridge, surrounded by 10,000 warships, listening to hold music. Riss leaned close and whispered, "Commander, something is very wrong here. Our weapons cannot touch their civilians. A single child mocked us without fear. An artificial intelligence is putting us on hold. This is not what we prepared for." Thaxvor did not answer. His mind was racing. He thought about the endless structures he had seen, the millions of ships, the transformed planets. He thought about the young human laughing as weapons fire washed harmlessly over his tiny vessel. For the first time in his life, Supreme Commander Thaxvor felt something he had never felt before. It took him a moment to recognize the emotion, because he had never experienced it. It was doubt, but he pushed the feeling aside. He was Vorth. His people had conquered 100 worlds. They had never been defeated. Whatever tricks these humans had learned, they could be overcome. They had to be. "Prepare the fleet for full assault," he ordered. "When I give the command, we attack with everything we have." Riss hesitated. "Commander, are you certain?" "I am certain. These creatures may have advanced, but they are still the same soft, weak beings our ancestors observed. They build wonders, but they do not have the will to fight. We will show them what true warriors can do." The hold music continued to play. Somewhere out there, 30 trillion humans went about their daily lives, barely paying attention to the ancient fleet that had come to conquer them. And on social media across 3 galaxies, Marcus's video was already going viral. The meeting took place on a space station designed specifically for the occasion. Human engineers had built it in less than a day. Using construction methods that would have seemed like magic to the Vorth, they had made it look old and simple, hoping not to frighten their guests too badly. Ambassador Yara Chen arrived first. She wore simple clothes and carried a basket of cookies she had baked herself. Chocolate chip, an ancient recipe from Earth's past. She believed that food could open doors that words could not. Supreme Commander Thax Vor arrived with 200 armed soldiers. They marched in perfect formation, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. Thax Vor himself wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under the station lights. He looked ready for battle. Yara smiled warmly. "Welcome, Commander. Please sit down. Would you like a cookie?" Thax Vor stared at her. "You offer me baked goods while my fleet surrounds your homeworld? The cookies are quite good. Old family recipe." The commander did not sit. His soldiers spread out around the room, taking defensive positions. Yara did not seem concerned. She placed the basket on the table and took a cookie for herself. "I have questions," Thax Vor said coldly. "You will answer them. Of course, ask anything you like. How did you advance so far, so fast? Our records show you were primitives. You had no technology, no civilization worth mentioning. How did you build all of this?" Yara nodded thoughtfully. She took a bite of her cookie before answering. "It is a long story. 6,000 years long, actually. Would you like to hear it?" "I want the truth." "The truth." Yara set down her cookie. "Very well. After your scouts visited Earth, my ancestors continued to grow and change. They built cities and empires. They invented writing and mathematics. They created art and music and philosophy. They also fought terrible wars against each other." She stood and walked slowly around the room. The Vorth soldiers watched her every move. "About 4,000 years after your visit, humans developed industrial technology, machines that could do the work of 100 hands. 200 years after that, they split the atom. They learned to release the energy that holds matter together." Thax Vor's eyes narrowed. "Nuclear weapons. Yes." Humans pointed those weapons at each other. Several times they came very close to destroying themselves completely. But they did not. Somehow, they always stepped back from the edge. Yara paused before a window. Outside, stars glittered in the darkness. Then came the computers. Then the artificial intelligences. Then genetic engineering. Then faster than light travel. Each new discovery brought new dangers. And each time, humans survived. They learned. They adapted. They grew. "Impossible," Thax Vor said. "No species advances that quickly. We nearly died many times." Yara replied. "Climate collapse killed billions. A plague called the Grey Death killed billions more. Civil wars tore civilizations apart. An asteroid struck our planet. Through all of it, humans kept going. We are very difficult to kill." She turned to face him. And then came the hive. Something flickered in Thax Vor's expression. Even the Vorth had heard rumors of the hive, a species of endless hunger that had threatened the entire galaxy centuries ago. "The hive came for us," Yara continued. "They came with billions of ships and trillions of soldiers. They had destroyed countless civilizations before us. They expected humans to be just another meal. What happened?" Yara's smile grew sad. "We won. It took decades. It cost us dearly. But we won. And after that victory, we decided to change. We decided that we would never again be the kind of species that conquered and destroyed. We would become something better." She gestured, and a holographic display filled the room. Light and color swirled around them, forming images of ships and stations and weapons. "This is humanity's current military capability," Yara said quietly. "What you see is only a fraction of what we possess." The hologram showed fleets of warships that made Thax Vor's fleet look like children's toys. It showed planet-cracking weapons that could shatter worlds. It showed Dyson collectors that surrounded entire stars. It showed things that Thax Vor could not even identify, shapes and technologies beyond his understanding. "We do not use most of these anymore," Yara added. "We consider them unethical. They exist only as a last resort, to protect ourselves if we must." Thax Vor stared at the hologram. His scales had gone pale. Behind him, his soldiers shifted nervously. "This is a trick," he said. "An illusion, to frighten us. It is not a trick. Helen, please confirm for our guest." The AI's voice spoke from the air. "All displayed weapons and capabilities are real and operational. Current human military forces could neutralize the Vorth fleet in approximately 4 minutes with 0 casualties on either side." 4 minutes, Thax Vor repeated. His voice was hollow. Sub-Commander Riss stepped forward. "Commander, perhaps we should reconsider our approach. The humans clearly do not wish us harm. If we withdraw now..." "Withdraw?" Thax Vor spun to face her. "Return home in shame? Tell our Empress that we ran away from these..." He could not finish the sentence. He did not know what to call humans anymore. They were not the primitives he had expected. They were not like any species he had ever encountered. "We offer you peace," Yara said gently. "We offer you friendship. We can share our knowledge, our medicine, our technology. Your people could join the galactic community. There is room for everyone." Thax Vor's hands clenched into fists. His honor, his pride, his entire identity as a warrior screamed against what she was offering. He had come here to conquer, not to be pitied. "The Vorth do not accept charity," he growled. "We take what we want. That is our way." "Your way will get your soldiers killed," Yara replied, still gentle. "Not by us. We will not harm them. But if you attack other species less patient than humans, they will defend themselves. You will lose everything." Thax Vor was silent for a long moment. The holographic weapons still floated around him, a silent reminder of how outmatched he truly was. "I need time," he finally said, "to consult with my Empress. Take all the time you need. We are not going anywhere." Thax Vor turned and marched toward the exit. His soldiers followed. At the door, he stopped and looked back. "Why?" he asked. "Why show us mercy? If you have this power, why not simply destroy us?" Yara picked up another cookie. "Because we remember what it was like to be young and afraid and angry. Because we learned that destroying others only destroys ourselves. Because every species deserves a chance to grow." She smiled. "And because cookies taste better when shared." Thax Vor stared at her for a long moment. Then he left without another word. Riss lingered at the door. She looked at Yara with something that might have been respect. "He will not surrender," Riss said quietly. "His pride will not allow it." "I know. Then what will you do?" Yara sighed. "Whatever we must. Without hurting anyone. It will not be easy, but we have learned to be creative." Riss nodded slowly. "Your species is strange. I do not understand you at all. That is okay. We do not always understand ourselves." Riss left. Yara stood alone in the meeting room, surrounded by floating holograms of terrible weapons that humanity had promised never to use again. "Helen," she said, "prepare the containment protocols. Non-lethal only. No exceptions." "Understood, Ambassador." "No exceptions." Yara ate another cookie. It was going to be a long day. Supreme Commander Thax Vor stood on the bridge of the Eternal Victory and gave the order he had waited his entire life to give. "All ships," he said, "attack." 10,000 Vorth warships opened fire at once. Energy beams lanced through space. Missiles screamed toward their targets. For one beautiful moment, Thax Vor felt like a true warrior, leading his people to glory. Then the humans did something strange. They did not fire back. Instead, human ships simply moved. They slipped between weapon blasts like water flowing around stones. They danced through missile swarms without being touched. They moved faster than Vorth sensors could track, faster than Vorth computers could calculate. "What is happening?" Thax Vor demanded. "Why are our weapons not hitting anything?" Krell, the sensor officer, was trembling. "They are too fast, Commander. Our targeting systems cannot lock onto them. It is like trying to catch smoke with your hands. Then fire everything. Blanket the entire area." They tried. The Vorth fleet unleashed every weapon they had, filling space with destruction. And still the human ships danced, untouched and unhurried. Then the humans began their own attack. But it was not the kind of attack Thax Vor expected. There were no explosions, no casualties, no death. Vorships simply stopped working. The first wave was electromagnetic pulses, carefully tuned to disable power systems without causing permanent damage. Hundreds of Vorth vessels went dark, floating dead in space. The second wave was more subtle. Tiny machines, invisible to the naked eye, slipped through hull breaches and air vents. They found weapon systems and gently disconnected critical components. They found engines and put them to sleep. The third wave was gravity. Human ships generated focused gravity wells that held Vorth vessels in place, unable to move or maneuver. Within 6 hours, the entire Vorth fleet was helpless. 10,000 warships, frozen like insects in amber. Not a single Vorth had been killed. Not a single Vorth had even been seriously injured. Thax Vor stood on his darkened bridge, listening to the emergency lights hum. His hands shook with rage and shame. He had led the greatest military force in Vorth history, and he had been defeated without his enemy even trying. "Commander," Riss said softly, "there is a human vessel approaching." "Of course there is." The airlock opened. Thax Vor expected soldiers, weapons, chains. He expected to be taken prisoner and humiliated. Instead, 3 humans walked in carrying medical supplies and boxes of food. They wore simple clothes with a symbol on the chest that Thax Vor did not recognize. One of them, a cheerful young woman with dark skin and bright eyes, smiled at him. "Hello, I am Dr. Amara Osei, Human Humanitarian Corps. Is anyone injured? We have medical supplies, food, water, and entertainment packages if you are bored." Thax Vor stared at her. "Entertainment packages? Yes. We have music, games, educational videos, cooking shows. The cooking shows are very popular. Do any of your soldiers have dietary restrictions?" Behind the doctor, her colleagues were already moving through the ship. One of them found a Vorth soldier with an injured leg, an old wound that had never healed properly. The human knelt beside him and began treatment. "What are you doing?" the soldier demanded. "Fixing your leg. This injury is from years ago, yes? It must hurt all the time. Hold still. This will only take a moment." The human pressed a small device against the soldier's leg. There was a warm sensation, and then the pain stopped. Pain that had been the soldier's constant companion for 20 years simply vanished. The soldier looked at his leg in wonder. "How did you?" "Medical technology. We will teach your doctors how to do this, if you want. Nobody should have to live with pain." Similar scenes played out across the entire fleet. Human humanitarian workers boarded every Vorth vessel, offering aid and comfort. They treated injuries. They fixed broken equipment. They handed out food and water. On one ship, a human found a group of young Vorth soldiers huddled together. Frightened and confused, he sat down with them and started teaching them a card game. Within an hour, they were laughing. On another ship, a human engineer noticed that the life support system was malfunctioning, a problem the Vorth crew had been struggling with for months. She fixed it in 10 minutes and then spent an hour teaching the Vorth engineers how the repair worked. Thax Vor watched all of this through scattered reports and confused communications. His fleet had been utterly defeated, and now his enemies were making friends with his soldiers. "This is wrong," he muttered. "This is all wrong." Dr. Osei appeared beside him. "Would you like a cookie?" "Ambassador Chen asked me to bring some. She baked them herself." He looked down at the offered basket. Chocolate chip cookies, still warm, the same ones from the meeting. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "We came to conquer you. We threatened to kill your people. Why are you helping us?" Dr. Osei's smile softened. "Because that is who we are now. We were not always this way. Our ancestors did terrible things to each other. We learned from those mistakes, but we are your enemies. Are you? You came here because your government told you to. Your soldiers fight because they were trained to. None of you chose to hate us. Given the chance, I think most of you would rather be friends." Thax Vor did not know how to respond to that. Far away, on the Vorth homeworld, Empress Shalveth watched the reports come in. She had expected news of glorious victory. Instead, she saw her entire fleet disabled, without a fight. She saw human healers treating her soldiers' wounds. She saw human engineers fixing her ship's systems. She saw her warriors learning card games and laughing with the enemy. And then she saw something else. Human ships had arrived at her planet. Not warships, cargo vessels. They carried food, medicine, technology, and a simple message. "These are gifts," the message said. "No conditions, no demands. We simply wanted you to know that you are not alone in the universe. If you ever want to talk, we are here." The Empress sat on her throne for a long time, thinking about what she had seen. She thought about the mighty fleet that had left her world, and the helpless fleet that remained. She thought about the humans who had every reason to destroy them and instead offered cookies and healing. What kind of monsters are these? She whispered to her advisors. What kind of creatures respond to war with kindness? No one had an answer. Back on the Eternal Victory, Thaxvor finally took a cookie. He bit into it slowly, tasting the sweetness on his tongue. It is good, he admitted. I know, Dr. Osei said. Ambassador Chen is an excellent baker. She is also an excellent warrior. She defeated my entire fleet without firing a shot. The doctor shook her head. She is not a warrior. None of us are warriors anymore. We are just humans, trying to do better than we did before. Thaxvor looked around his darkened bridge. His soldiers were eating human food and receiving human medical care. The war was over before it had truly begun. He had lost everything. His fleet, his pride, his purpose, and yet, somehow, he did not feel like a prisoner. He felt like someone waking up from a long, dark dream. What happens now? He asked. Dr. Osei smiled. Now we talk, we listen, we learn about each other. And maybe, in time, we become friends. Thaxvor took another bite of his cookie. It really was very good. 5 years had passed since the day the Vorth came to conquer humanity. 5 years of change, growth, and healing. 5 years that transformed both species in ways no one had expected. The Vorth Dominion no longer existed. In its place was the Vorth Republic, a new government built on principles that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. The old empress had stepped down peacefully. The first time in Vorth history that power had been transferred without bloodshed. Ambassador Riss, once sub-commander of the invasion fleet, now worked side by side with Yara Chen. Together, they had helped reshape Vorth society from the ground up. It had not been easy. Many Vorth had resisted the changes, clinging to their traditions of conquest and dominance. But slowly, generation by generation, things were shifting. On this particular morning, Riss and Yara walked through the streets of New Harmony, a city on Vorth Prime that had been built jointly by both species. Vorth and humans lived together here, worked together, raised families together. Children of both species played in the parks, chasing each other and laughing. I never thought I would see this, Riss said quietly. When I was young, we were taught that other species existed only to serve us. That strength was the only virtue worth having. Yara nodded. We were taught similar things once. Humans fought each other for thousands of years over land, resources, ideas. We killed millions of our own kind in wars that now seem senseless. What changed you? Yara thought about the question. Many things. Pain and loss taught us that war brings no lasting victory. Technology gave us the power to destroy ourselves completely, which forced us to find better ways. But mostly, I think, we simply grew tired of hatred. It takes so much energy to hate. Kindness is easier. Riss made a sound that might have been a laugh. Kindness is not easier for Vorth. It is the hardest thing we have ever tried. That is why it matters so much. The things that are easy do not change us. The things that are hard shape us into something new. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, passing shops and restaurants and schools. A young Vorth child ran up to them, excited about something. Ambassador Riss, look what I made at school. The child held up a painting. It showed 2 figures, one Vorth and one human, standing together under a sky full of stars. Riss knelt down to examine the painting carefully. This is beautiful work. You have real talent. The child beamed with pride. My teacher says I could be an artist someday, a real artist, just like the humans. You can be whatever you want to be, Riss said gently. That is the gift we are building for your generation. The child ran off happily. Riss stood and watched them go, something soft in her yellow eyes. Do you ever regret it? Yara asked. The old ways? The power and glory? Riss shook her head. The old ways were a cage we built for ourselves. We thought we were strong, but we were only afraid of change, afraid of others, afraid of showing any weakness. She paused. Your people taught us that true strength is not about hurting others. It is about lifting them up. Across the city, in a quiet garden, former Supreme Commander Thaxvor sat alone. 5 years of exile had changed him. His scales had lost their shine. His shoulders bent forward in a way they never had before. He spent his days in this garden, thinking about the past, A shadow fell across his bench. He looked up to find an old human standing there, leaning on a cane. The human's face was lined with centuries of experience. "Mind if I sit?" the human asked. Thaxvor gestured to the empty space beside him. "It is a free garden." The human sat with a grateful sigh. "My name is James Okonkwo. I heard you come here often, and I thought you might appreciate some company. Why would you want to keep company with me? I am a disgrace to my people. A failed conqueror. A symbol of everything the Vorth now want to forget." James smiled gently. "I was a soldier once too, a long time ago, during the Hive War. I commanded a fleet that destroyed 17 enemy Hive ships." He paused. "I still dream about it sometimes. The screaming of their dying." Thaxvor looked at him with new interest. "You fought the Hive? Then you are a hero among your people, perhaps. Or perhaps I am just an old man who did terrible things for good reasons." James pulled out a flask and offered it to Thaxvor. "Drink?" Thaxvor took the flask and sipped. The liquid burned pleasantly. "I came to tell you something," James continued. "Something I wish someone had told me, back when I was drowning in my own guilt. Are you listening?" "I am listening. What you feel right now, the shame, the confusion, the sense that everything you believed was wrong, that is not weakness. That is growth. A tree must shed its old leaves before it can grow new ones. A warrior must shed his old certainties before he can become something greater." Thaxvor was quiet for a long moment. "I led 10,000 ships against your people. I wanted to enslave them. How do I live with that? The same way I live with the Hive ships I destroyed, one day at a time. By doing better. By helping build a world where others do not have to make the same mistakes." James took back his flask. "You are not defined by what you were. You are defined by what you choose to become." Thaxvor stared at the old human. "Your people are insane. You should hate me. You should want revenge. Hatred is too heavy to carry for long. It drags you down until you cannot move forward." James stood and stretched his old bones. "Come visit me sometime. I have stories about the Hive War that might interest you, and I make excellent tea." He walked away, leaving Thaxvor alone with his thoughts. Across the galaxy, on a university world called Nova Athens, the young human named Marcus stood before an auditorium full of students. Vorth and humans sat together, taking notes and listening carefully. "The subject of today's lecture," Marcus said, "is first contact comedy. Specifically, how memes and humor helped prevent a war." He clicked a button, and a hologram appeared. It showed his famous video from 5 years ago, the one where he had live-streamed the Vorth invasion while completely unafraid. When the Vorth fleet arrived, most of humanity was not scared. We were amused. Not because we looked down on the Vorth, but because the situation was genuinely funny. Aliens who had been planning an invasion for 6,000 years, arriving to find their targets, had become one of the most advanced civilizations in the universe. The audience laughed. Marcus smiled. "But here is the important lesson. Laughter is not cruelty. We did not mock the Vorth to hurt them. We laughed because laughter is how humans process the absurd. And then, after we finished laughing, we reached out our hands in friendship." He clicked again. The hologram changed to show images of Vorth and humans working together, living together, building together. The Vorth could have been our enemies. They wanted to be our enemies. But we chose to see them as friends who had not been made yet. And in doing so, we gained something far more valuable than any victory in battle. After the lecture, Riss found Marcus in the hallway. She had come to observe, to see how the young generation of both species was learning to think about the past. "That was a good lecture," she said. Marcus grinned. "Thanks. I still cannot believe they let me teach university courses. 5 years ago, I was just a kid who liked making videos. You were the first human most Vorth ever saw. A child, unafraid, laughing in the face of our entire military. You changed how my people thought about humanity." "I guess I did." "Huh?" Marcus rubbed the back of his head. "Honestly, I was not even thinking about all that at the time. I just thought it was funny. That is exactly why it mattered." They walked together toward the campus gardens. Students of both species passed them, barely noticing the historic figures in their midst. "Your species is insane," Riss said, echoing words she had said many times before. "You turn everything into a joke. You offer cookies to people who threaten to destroy you. You heal your enemies and teach them card games." "Yeah," Marcus agreed cheerfully. That is pretty much how we work. And somehow, it works. It does not always work, Marcus admitted. We have made plenty of mistakes. We have hurt people and been hurt. But we keep trying anyway. I think that is the important part. We never stop trying to be better. Rhys nodded slowly. She looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear. My grandmother used to tell me that the universe was cold and cruel, and that only the strong survived. But now I think she was wrong. The universe is not cold. It is waiting for species to grow wise enough to make it warm. Marcus did not have a clever response to that. He just stood beside her, watching the stars come out, thinking about how strange and wonderful the universe had become. Far away, in her garden on Vorth Prime, a young child finished her painting of a Vorth and a human standing together. She signed her name at the bottom and smiled. Above her, the stars shone with the light of 100 billion worlds. And on many of those worlds, humans and Vorth and 1,000 other species were learning to live together. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better than it had been before, and that was enough.